hey, the very tiny cross-section of everybody that watches my videos, while I'm waiting for some hand painting to dry and ruminating on why I don't hand paint anymore. It's because I suck! I thought I'd go ahead and jump on the hashtag bandwagon and get in on this top 17 of 2017 thing. Now, I don't quite buy enough robots for a top 17 list to be meaningful, so I whittled it down to 7. The top 7 of 2017. So without further ado, coming in at number 7, Fans Toys Soar. Now, he didn't come out this year, but I did get him this year. And they also put out Cesium and a bunch of other stuff this year. Arguably, some of those are better figures. But I'm putting this guy on the list instead for a couple of reasons. First off, it's just so nice to finally have him. This took me 5 tries thanks to a bunch of Chinese eBay scammers. And also, he just somehow perfectly typifies everything that's good and everything that's bad about Fans Toys. I mean, the presentation is amazing. I don't know what they do with their chrome to make it both more beautiful and more durable than literally all the other chrome on Earth, but this guy packs a ton of it, and it's really nice. And up here on his chest panels, he's got this paint thing they do where they actually lay down a layer of silver and then put the color over top of it. You know, the kind of paint scheme that's typically reserved for luxury sports cars. But where it falls flat is the engineering. I mean, for what the legs actually do in transformation, there's no reason in the world they needed to be this complicated. And if you look here, you'll see a very rare and special thing. The wings here fold back on this extra hinge, which is not used in pterodactyl mode, nor used in the transformation. It exists solely to improve the articulation of the arms in robot mode. And that is the first and only time a Fans Toys engineer has solved a problem preemptively instead of just putting a dire warning about it in the instruction manual. Seriously, this thing is like 40% dire warning by volume. And he actually has some difficulty holding some poses just because his chest panels are made of die-cast for really no reason at all. And it makes him a little bit too heavy for the knee ratchets. You know, die-cast isn't seasoning, guys. You can't just sprinkle it in to taste. Knock it off. And speaking of knocking things off, at number 6, it's oversized KO Warbotron. Now, I searched the entire internet, and I couldn't seem to find a single Transformer reviewer who was into knockoffs, or Bruticus's, or light piping. So I may have to do a full review of this guy myself one day. So for right now, I'll just give you the highlights. Specifically, he's enormous. He's a little bit bigger than Titan Debbie, and they've actually cleaned up a lot of the tolerance and joints issues. He actually stands up better in combined mode than the original. Unfortunately, they did not fix some of the curious design decisions in both Onslaught and Vortex, but the combined mode is spot on. And I want to stress this. I got this whole thing for $125. That's less than the Unite Warriors set. At this size and this quality and that price, this has got to be one of the no-braineriest Transformer purchases I ever bit on. And speaking of biting brains, at number 5, it's Titan's Return Tripsy. Now, Trypticon came along when I was a kid a little bit too late. He sort of showed up just as I was starting to get out of Transformers, so I never really had a chance to get him. So, to finally have a big, serious, proper Trypticon is a real treat for me. I think I might have preferred him without the translucent undercarriage, but even I can't say that the gimmick isn't fun, even though I only have one Titan Master. Don't worry, Nautica, you'll get him next time. And even though I never really get to transform him because I don't have a desk that's big enough to accommodate his base mode, so I have to do it on the floor in the living room, and the dog is blind now, so he trips over him. Oh, is that what the name means? I thought it was some takeoff on Triptych because he has 3 modes. And speaking of takeoffs, number 4 is Zeta Toys Takeoff, also known as Blastoff. And this guy is mainly landing so high because he was kind of a surprise. I mean, I saw the same pictures you have, and I dismissed him as a Kibble panel-y freak too, but in hand, he's actually really fun. I mean, for one thing, this space shuttle mode is pretty much perfect. It's got the thick wings, the shape's exactly right. They even filled in the underside. We'll get to that. And I found I actually really like transforming him. It's sort of weird. Of my recent purchases, this guy is the one that you would look at and think, that's not going to be any fun to transform. But it is. And there is actually a method to the madness here with the panels. You see, they serve to keep as much of the robot hidden as possible when he's in combined mode, because Blastoff and Vortex are typically represented as being more like their alt modes when they're combined, whereas the aerial bots tend to look more like wadded up robots in combined mode. So doing this, we get a nice clean space shuttle arm. The only problem with this guy, if there has to be one, is that he does rather make the Warbotron Blastoff look like he's for the birds. And speaking of the birds, at number 3, it's the MMC Tape Bird mode. I don't remember what they called. Not going to look it up. And I know what you're going to say. They're too big. And yes, scale-wise, they maybe are a scooch too big to hang out with the other Decepticon masterpieces, even the slightly larger third-party versions that I tend to prefer. But these guys have taught me an important lesson about scale, which is I don't care about scale. What I actually want is my Decepticons to be as big as possible. And these guys are perfect size for terrorizing some Autobots. Now, I will admit their tape mode is a bit shoddy, but it is so nice to have a version of this design that's big enough to actually do something with. And if a friend comes over and starts messing with it, I don't have to spend the whole time like a Fans Toys instruction book going, no, don't do that. Oh, that doesn't move that way. No, the wings don't go up. And this is my favorite thing they can do. And if you're familiar with the bylaws, this means that I'm leader of the Decepticons now. I think I actually prefer Buzzsaw just because his colors pop more. Although I suppose it isn't Laserbeak's fault that the Autobots have flooded my Masterpiece shelf with red in the last couple of years. And speaking of red Masterpiece Autobots, it's Masterpiece Ironhide with the Shadow Fisher upgrades. Yes, I know Masterpiece Ironhide came out. I don't know when Masterpiece Ironhide came out. But I know I got these upgrades for him this year, and they really brought the figure to life for me in a way I was not expecting. They just make him look so much more dynamic and action-ready.
Blam blam, I'm Southern. Mustangs and Cheerwine, y'all!
And I was really surprised how much they've revitalized this guy for me. I put him on this list because this it's like having a whole new figure. The only downside is the transformation's a tiny bit more finicky. You just have to be a little bit more careful about the order you do things in. But aside from that one nitpick, I would say these are the best Ironhide upgrades under the sun. And speaking of the sun, at number 1, it's Masterpiece Sunstreaker, like you probably guessed. This guy. Yeah, I know, he has a backpack. That's literally the only downside. And they have at least made some effort to make it look like a cohesive item, like the jetpack that he was originally supposed to have before Sideswipe stole it and gave it to Optimus. Just look how dynamic that robot mode is. It's brilliant. And the engineering, which is usually the most important thing about Transformers to me, on this thing is just off the chain. Like how the feet and these panels fold out to the side in ways that are generally unnecessary but serve to make transforming those parts easier. That's the only reason it does that. And then you've got things like these extra joints here that serve no purpose other than to give him bonus articulation. The only downside of this guy is that he does make some of the older molds, especially his twin brother here, look a little bit lumpy and slow by comparison. I mean, the only guy that can keep up with him in terms of posability is Sphinx, and this is literally the best third-party car former we've ever seen. So for them to have released something like this, especially in a year where we've had a lot of third-party releases with problematic engineering like Coot and Stratotanker, for Takara to have stolen the show at the end like this, with this masterpiece of a masterpiece, just sort of reminds you who's really top of the pile. And speaking of piles, and so that's my top 7 of 2017. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next year, not because I'm necessarily going to do another year-end list, just that's a good rough estimate for how often I put out content. See you there! Hey, so I get a lot of questions, usually about selling figures, commissions, how I build, things like that. So I thought I'd do sort of a fact-type video. So if you have any specific questions about those areas or questions about other stuff in general, then just feel free to shoot me a PM or leave a comment and I will answer them, maybe, when I get around to doing another video in like 6 months. See you there! I want to make sure we're all clear on the rules here. Twins. Not twins.